Hi there, Ronnie here, coming at you with a video that may seem about 20 years too late, but part of any therapy is looking at past trauma um, and dealing with it. And in that vein, I want to talk about something that has it annoyed me at the time, and over the years, my annoyance has become less visceral because obviously, um, I don't really watch the show anymore, but it's undeniably still there and does actually impact on certain parts of viewership. As I said in a previous video about Joss Whedon, I was a huge, huge fan of Buffy. For reasons I'm not going to go into in this video, I was in a very, very, very dark place, a very low place, when I started. I had seen episodes of Buffy off and on, and I enjoyed it. But I really started my watching sort of religiously, I guess, in season 5. And found a certain amount of comfort in that. So when I got cable TV, which allowed me access to the then season 6 of Buffy, I was very happy. Ish. Now, I can appreciate what the writers were trying to do. I can appreciate the skill to an extent in which they attempted to achieve it. And I can certainly appreciate the skill of the actors who took what they got and did their best with it. And I was a zealot, bored the hell out of my friends with it. But something didn't sit right with me. And that something was the death of Tara. And it is something that I have never truly forgiven Joss Whedon for, and never will. Now, a lot has been said. What's sort of just to say what's actually kicked this off is I noticed there was a few people who do reaction videos to old films, TV shows, and so on. And there's a fair few have done reactions to Buffy seasons. And out of a sort of morbid curiosity, I watched a couple of them sort of last night and today, dealing with episode 19 of season 6, an episode called Seeing Red. And that is the episode in which Tara dies. And no one was particularly happy. It is also the episode where the character of Spike attempts to rape Buffy. So it's not a happy episode by any means. And I'm not a big fan of that storyline either. In fact, I'm not a big fan of a lot of the storylines in season 6. And I think the problem I have with season 6 is I don't have a problem with dark storylines. I don't have a problem with a certain nihilism in storylines. Heck, I think the film Seven is amazing because it's dark and it stays dark and it doesn't pull its punches. But that's a 2 hour film. And after you've watched it, yeah, it'll stay with you a while. But you can put it away, you don't have to watch it anymore. But season 6 started well. I mean, it was dark, but it started well. It was dealing with interesting themes. Buffy had died at the end of season 5. She was resurrected, she was brought back. Um, Willow was becoming stronger and stronger with magic and was beginning to sort of lose any sort of moral focus in spite of Tara trying to keep her from going over the edge. Willow was at that point of, I am a good person, I am doing this, it is a good thing, therefore it must be right. The problem with that is it creates a slippery slope, moral, in terms of your moral compass. Um, and obviously, Buffy starts a relationship. I wouldn't even say it was a relationship with Spike. She feels bereft because she wasn't in hell as Willow and the others were afraid of. She was actually in heaven, and she's been ripped out. And she feels uh, uh, almost a mourning of self and very depressed and dealing with the shock of that. And she ends up in a very destructive relationship with Spike. Um, Meanwhile, Xander and Anya, who are engaged to be married, Xander is having worries because he still has fears of the kind of person his dad was, and he's worried he's going to end up turning out the same way. So the first half of the season is setting things up nicely. It's looking like they're going to use oh, yawning. It's looking like they're going to try a magic as drugs metaphor. Now that's problematic to start with. Because magic, particularly with regards to Willow and Tara, had been a euphemism for their burgeoning sexual relationship. So to turn that euphemism into something that is destructive and abusive um, is very, very troubling. Um, then they kind of twist it, and they have her starting to get hooked on a real dark magic because of this warlock. Um, and she starts really becoming a sort of junkie. The problem is that round about the halfway mark in the season, she goes cold turkey. This is where the problem starts for me, and why I have a problem with the season. It's really the back end of the season because it makes so many mistakes. And it all boils down to something I've said in a previous video, and that is Joss Whedon is an emotional sadist. He cannot handle happiness. Now, I have major problems with the Spike Buffy storyline. Um, the attempted rape was not needed. I think it's telling that James Masters, as a result of that scene, has now got it as a clause in his contract that he never does anything like that ever again in any show, anytime, anywhere that he ever does. And I have a feeling, I can't confirm this is speculation on my part, but I do wonder if the emotional distress that scene caused Sarah Michelle Gellar was a factor in her deciding that when her contract ran out at the end of season 7, she was not renewing. And I say again, they are both completely professional all the way through. The performances are great from everyone. You know, when you're given turds, you kind of have to rise to make the best of it. Then we get Tara's death, and I have so many problems with Tara's death, and I'll leave aside for the moment the the kill the gays trope, the dead evil lesbian cliche trope that was around. The writers knew it was around because they had been told about it repeatedly long before. They had all said, they're pretty much all on record saying, yes, we know about that cliche. We have no interest in repeating that cliche. That cliche is not going to happen. And then what happened with Tara's death and Willow going off the deep end and becoming Dark Willow is not only did they go right into the cliche, they possibly, in that storyline, filmed the definitive example of it, which is not something they should be proud of at all, ever. And it's problematic because the writers had said they weren't going to do it. Now, if you know you're going to do that storyline, you know you're going to do that ending, you know you're going to go there, don't lie to your fans. Avoid the question. Give them a non committal wait and see response. Don't lie to your bloody viewers. Secondly, putting Amber Benson in the opening credits. Now, Amber Benson had been a guest star for 2 seasons. Apparently, this was by her own will. She didn't want to be part of the main cast. I don't know if that's true. Given everything that we've now learned about Joss Whedon over the last couple of years because of various comments by former cast members and so on. Her not being a full cast member and being absolutely beholden probably was a good thing. But the official line was twofold. One, it was a thank you to Amber Benson for her work on the show. And two, it was Joss's intention. He always wanted to put someone in the credits and kill them off that episode. The idea being that no one, at that point, you know that no one is safe. Now, there's a big problem with the first one, which is the respect to Amber Benson. There's better ways of showing respect. How about not killing off the character in such a pointless bloody way? How about singing her praises, for God's sake? None of this, we were respecting you with that. Secondly, the whole thing of Joss wanting to put someone in the credits. This was born from the pilot of Buffy, where he had wanted to put just Eric Balfour, who played Jesse, um, into the opening cast, and then kill him off to give the idea that anyone would be unsafe. And I suppose if back then that would have worked. Um, but this was season 6 of Buffy, and season 3 of Angel was happening at the same time. Now, this is important for a couple of things. One, you can't say that you're putting someone in the main credits just to kill them off because it will shock the audience into thinking no one is safe. Not after 6 seasons of Buffy. Also, he'd already stated that he'd kind of done it already with Doyle in season 1 of Angel. Now, to be fair, Doyle lasts 9 episodes before his death. But still, he was meant to be there and killed off, apparently. There's conflicting reports whether he was actually ever meant to be killed off or whether some things that were happening in the guy's Glenn Quinn's private life was impacting. But regardless, he was stating that was always his intention. So to now state that, now I finally get to do it, is a bit disingenuous. Par the course for Whedon, but disingenuous. The problem is, regardless of the reason, the effect is it looked like a cheap way of lulling the audience into a false sense of security just to make the gut punch at the end all the more vicious and hurt more. Which is why he did it. Let's be honest. It's why he did it. Now, to me, if you need a gimmick like that to sell the ending, you know the ending is problematic. If you need a gimmick to pull it off. It's not the only gimmick in that episode, but it's a gimmick. Then we get to the scene itself. And I have major problems with the way it was written and filmed and staged. In the scene, Willow and Tara are upstairs in their bedroom. They're clothed, they're talking to each other, they're kissing, they're being flirtatious, about the fact that they're in clothes, and one, I can't remember who says it, but one of them says, "Don't get used to them," which is wonderfully flirty. Now, the other thing before I get to that actually is due to the stupidity of the due to the stupidity of networks, Willow and Tara were never allowed to show any great affection for each other. The WB just wouldn't let them kiss at all. They had to fight tooth and nail to get a kiss in the episode The Body. When they moved to UPN for season 6, UPN relaxed the rules a little, but still, they weren't allowed to be intimate to the same degree that the straight couples on the show were. I mean, they were humping all the time. And Willow and Tara were the most passionately chaste couple on telly. We knew they were at it, but unlike Buffy and Spike, who were boning each other left, right, and center, and Xander and Anya, who were boning each other left, right, and center. You barely heard a peep out of Willow and Tara, apart from that episode. We'll get back to that. But anyway, come the end. So they are upstairs. The bedroom window looks over at the back garden. In the back garden, Buffy is having a heart-to-heart talk with Xander. And then Warren walks into the back garden, mouths off at Buffy for spoiling his plans, and then proceeds with a gun, a handgun, automatic handgun, to shoot her several times. As he's running, he's kind of shooting and his arms at an odd angle. It then cuts to the bedroom window, and we see blood spray hitting Willow's white top. Cuts to Tara, who's wearing a blue top with a big that now has a hole just at her heart, and she looks sort of concerned at Willow, and she says, "Your shirt," you know, typical sort of Tara. She's concerned because Willow's shirt looks suddenly gotten all dirty, and then she just collapses dead. Buffy is also shot. She's injured. You can see that she's kind of struggling for breath. Tara is clearly out at that point. There's no way that she's coming back. Certainly not by any sort of normal medical means. There are so many problems with that setup, and the way it's shot. Now, the windows, they're not exactly thin glass. When Warren starts mouthing off, he's not exactly quiet about it. And they're near the window, so it's not like they're having to walk across the entire room, Willow and Tara. They're near the window anyway, because Tara remarks about seeing Xander and Buffy in the garden as a way to segue down to that conversation. So the question is, why aren't they looking out the window when Warren arrives? Why do they not flinch and duck when they hear the shots go off? Or go near the window when the shots go off, what the hell's that? But they don't. Instead, Tara's just standing there. She's not at the window. She's a few feet from it, looking at Willow, who's a few feet from her, as if they haven't moved at all in the entirety of the conversation that's happened in the garden. And then, and this is going to sound possibly a ridiculous point to make, but there's a reason for making it. That bullet is ridiculous. The bullet that gets fired is going up at an angle. It's not going straight. It's going up at an angle, goes through the window, through Tara, enough to cause an exit wound, but doesn't hit Willow. Blood spatter hits Willow. That bullet's illogical. I made a gag to one of my friends years ago that I find it ironic that one of the craziest bullets ever seen on television is fired by a guy called Warren. alluding to the Warren Commission and the infamous magic bullet theory from the shooting of Kennedy. And my friend sort of joked that maybe that was the point of it. The problem with it, and this is why I bring it up, is if you Martin Oxon claimed that one of the reasons they wanted to do that kind of death for Tara rather than a mystical one was they wanted to show the reality of something like a death by firearm, which happens horrifically all too frequently, especially in America. Rather, to show an everyday death, something that people actually deal with, rather than the sort of supernatural and the mystical that is often the case with Buffy. The problem with that is severalfold. One, if you're going to make a realistic comment about gun violence and the horror of that sort of normality of gun violence, don't use a ridiculous bullet to do it. Bloody stupid thing. I would have had more. It would have made slightly more sense, given everything, if Willow and Tara had been in the kitchen at the time and the bullet had come through the kitchen window. But then you've got other problems about why the hell didn't they duck. But at least trajectory-wise, you could have understood a stray bullet going that way, but not the way it went. In fact, the way he's bloody angled his shot, it doesn't even look like it hit the flipping window. Also, if we're going to talk about the horror of a mundane death, they'd already done that season before with Joyce dying from complications from brain aneurysm. And the body, which deals with that immediacy, is one of the greatest episodes of television. I will give Joss Whedon his credit where it's due. It's one of the best episodes of television you'll ever see. It's harrowing, and it's pain. It's dealing with something that you rarely see television deal with, which they tend to whitewash over the immediacy of someone's death and the immediacy of reaction. And that episode actually deals only with the immediacy of reaction, which it's an interesting episode. It's a very good episode. Season 5 is a very good season. So the bullet being some sort of symbol of sort of everyday and the mundane doesn't work on those levels. Plus, one could argue there's a million bloody cop shows out there that deal with people shooting people and so on. There's enough mundane deaths with guns on television. Do you really need it in a show that's dealing with the mystical and the supernatural? I'm not sure you do. In the immediate aftermath, Willow contacts, I think it's Osiris, and demands Tara be returned. And the god basically says, no, she died. She didn't die by mystical means. She died by normal means. It is a normal death, is a moral death. She cannot be returned. Rubbish. And this is one of the other problems I have with the storyline. I'm all for a show that deals with magic and monsters and all sorts of things to have its own sort of lore and its own sort of rules about how magic works and so on. And those rules can be different from any other show that's dealt with the same sort of thing. The only thing that I demand, and I think it's reasonable to demand, is that they're consistent. Have consistency. The worst thing any show can do is change and augment, uh, a rule for the sake of drama. We want this death. It needs to happen. Oh, but what about this? We're just going to have to ignore that because if we go down that road, then we don't have our drama. And this is the problem when you start ignoring your lore. And the lore specifically in this one, well, there's two things. Firstly, earlier in season 6, Willow just after she and Tara break up for a good half of the season, actually. Willow has got her pet rat, which used to be her friend Amy, but is now her rat. And Willow, out of nowhere, just demands the spell that will change her back. Out of nowhere, she just suddenly, yeah, I want the spell. Come, Tara, why doesn't she have the spell? Now, the argument could be said, because there isn't a spell. Aha. But there is. As shown in the season 3 episode, The Zeppel, that there is a ritual that can be used because we see it happen. Now, what we see is one guy who looked basically human, even though he still has the bullet holes. Now, some of his other friends who have been in the ground a lot longer and a lot more rotted, they do come up looking more zombie-like. But he doesn't. And as he said, he was raised pretty much just after he was killed. Now, he's not particularly a nice guy, but the interesting thing is that it never goes into whether his personality is the one he always had, or the personality he now has because he was resurrected. Now, if it's the personality he always had, then the spell that was done on him to resurrect him basically resurrected him just back. He was just living again. He came back and he was his old self. Not healing for any bullet holes, but it was his old self. Now, if that's the case, then using that spell, she could have called that spell, done the ritual, and got Tara back. If it was because he came back wrong, maybe he came back, maybe the spell means that you come back somewhat twisted, maybe the spell means you come back with no soul. Whatever the reason, it still would have resurrected her in terms of her memories. And you could have had some interesting drama because Tara was already dead set against the idea of resurrecting Joyce in season 5. I think you get the impression that while she's going along with the resurrection of Buffy, she's been more worn down than agreeing. So her coming back from the dead would set up drama because she might not like the fact that she has been brought back. But the point is, the spell was there. And Willow, with a simple click, as she'd done earlier this season with Amy, should have been able to get that spell and do it. Why didn't she? Because it didn't. It was it didn't help the drama that the show was trying to create. And because of that, the show forgot its own lore, chose to ignore it. Now, it could be that the spell that was used was so unique that maybe she wouldn't have found it, maybe she wouldn't have gotten it. And maybe that's fine. There's a loophole that the writers could have used, but the fact that they didn't even go there means that they weren't really, they were too focused on the drama and not on the logic of it. So Tara's dead, she's gone, she's not coming back. Willow goes off a deep end, goes to the magic shop, imbues herself with all the power and knowledge from all these dark tomes and volumes from the magic shop. Her moral compass is completely gone. She's in full vengeance mode. She goes to see Rack, who's this warlock who'd been given her the dark magic that sent her on her way. And basically, she sucks him dry of all his magic, and that just completely twists her. She kills Warren by skinning him alive. Well, she kills Warren by slow motioning a bullet right the way through him. She's got him sort of lashed to a tree. She slow mo's a bullet through his chest, so he can feel it. Sews his mouth shut so he can't scream for help. And magically, his mouth is suddenly sewn up. And then emitting the words "bored now," which is what Vamp Willow in season 3 used to say. She skins him in one move, just one flick of the wrist, and all his skin comes off, and then he immolates. She goes after the other two of the trio, even though they weren't there when Warren shot at Buffy and Tara. She tries to kill them. Buffy intercedes. There's a fight. Giles suddenly comes back. He's been away for most of the season. He comes back. And there's this thing where she goes to this bluff at the on the coast. There's some statue of some goddess, and Willow is going to use her power to for the goddess to basically sort of eradicate the world. Willow, Xander, and Giles. She hits Giles and sort of takes his magic off him, and that's sort of pure magic that he's been given. It's not power that he has himself. He's been imbued with sort of pure magic. She takes it from him, and Xander is able to go there in the bluff and talk her down, because the pure magic inside her is allowing her to feel. It's cutting through all the darkness and allows her to feel, and then finally she lets go and starts to properly grieve for Tara's death. Leaving aside, as I say, leaving aside the kill the gays, dead evil lesbian trope, it's a stupid couple of episodes. Now, a lot of people like it because they love seeing Alison Hannigan go nuts. She's going dark. And again, I have to say, like everyone else, Alison Hannigan is giving it her all. So I don't have a problem in terms of the performance. The problem I have is you didn't need Tara's death to accomplish it. Tara barely hanging on in a coma cliche, I know, but considering some of the other cliches in play, that one at least is palatable. You could easily have ended it, but the season could have ended with Tara waking, and either she goes to Willow on at the coast and talks her down, or even talks to her telepathically and talks her down. But it was, you didn't need Tara's death to accomplish it. Also, if we're going to get pedantic, the other thing I have a problem with is if you look at the storyline, the last couple of episodes, if you look at it in terms of what they represent, you have Tara gets hurt and Willow goes off the deep end to have a go at the person who attacked her. Well, they've already done that in Tough Love in season 5. One of the loved ones of one of the Scoobies gets killed. That Scooby goes on a murder rampage to try and take out the person who killed them. Already did that with season 2 with Giles when Jenny Calendar was killed. It's been done before. Those elements have been done before, and they were done better. For me, the ending of season 6 is just like a weak mishmash of previous elements. As I say, I felt they were done better. Why? Because they were purer and they made logical sense at that point. The other problem I have with the death of Tara is the death of Tara. To me, there are reasons, legitimate reasons, that someone can think about killing off a character. One, the actor wants to leave. Two, there's no more storyline. You know, you've done everything with that character you could possibly do. And at that point, you're just repeating yourself. 3, the character is unpopular. 4, the storyline calls for a really dramatic moment. And only a death will truly do it. Those are the only reasons that a writer can then consider the possibility of killing off a character. So the first one's out because Amber Benson didn't want to leave. Okay, given everything we know now, maybe she was happy to be gone, but she liked that character. She liked playing that character. She liked the statement that character was making in the world, not just in the world of Buffy, but in the world beyond. Our own world, and the sort of positive representation of a gay character. So there's that. 2, I dismiss as well because they barely touched Tara as a character of the sort of 3 seasons that she'd been in over sort of 2.5 years. There's only been one Tara-centric episode, which was Family in season 5. Other than that, she was very much the support. Whereas other characters have had sort of focused episodes on themselves, more than one. So there was more to do Tara. It would have been nice in season 6 if we'd had an episode that was focused directly on Tara. Find out what she was doing whilst, her split from Willow, because you barely saw her for several episodes. That would have been nice. That would have been interesting. So there was more story to tell. So I dismissed 2. 3, whilst it's true that Tara was not popular at the start, and I doubt would be many people's top character, she was certainly mine, for reasons I'll explain in a minute. She certainly wasn't unliked. And if you want proof of that, if she was so unliked, they wouldn't have done such. They wouldn't have tried to make the death such a big thing. They wouldn't have known they were going to hurt people the way they were if she was a non-character. So we're left with 4. Reason 4. Drama that required a death. And as I've explained for myself, I don't see it. I don't think you can say that the drama required the death. So what are we left with? We're left with a death that didn't need to happen. Simple as that. Tara was my favourite character. Was she a robust fighter? No. Was she a sparkling conversationalist and wit? No, although she had her moments in season 6. Was she, sort of super powerful witch? No. Although she was a lot more powerful than I think they let on at times. But what she was, and what the reason I liked her so much, is that she was very much the moral center of the show. She was the one really decent character in the show. She was decent, she was kind. Her strength was her love. Not just of Willow, but of people generally. She genuinely cared about the Scoobies, Buffy's friends. When Buffy died, she pretty much became Dawn's surrogate mother. And you can see that relationship. That she's very much her sort of surrogate mom to Dawn. And she had a quiet strength about her. And the example I give actually is Tough Love, when she gets her mind sapped by Glory. Earlier that season, when they're first talking about Glory and the fact that she feeds off the sanity of her victims, she feeds off their sanity and leaves them sort of mindless, sort of insane. Tara indicates that she finds that idea even a worse idea than death. In Tough Love, when she's cornered by Glory, Glory makes it plain that she will feed off her unless she tells her who the key is. And Tara just looks at her defiantly, refusing to, knowing that she's about to face something that in her own mind is a fate worse than death. And she still does it. She still won't give up Dawn. To me, there's a quiet strength and sort of nobility there that I really liked. I think she was a great character. And there was so much more they could have done with her. And the killing her off was unnecessary. Then we get to the backlash and Joss's reaction to the backlash. Joss's first notion was, let's bring Amber back to be Tara in the episode Conversations with Dead People. Now, this is Tara as a manifestation of the first, so she would start sounding very sort of nice and Tara-like, but slowly but surely turn the knife and show herself to be evil at the end. Now, Amber Benson, I think, took one look at the script and went, no, you've hurt him enough. Because there's no way anyone could look at that script as anything other than sticking the knife into the audience. Because I think Joss was like, how dare you question my writing? How dare you question the pain that I give you? Joss's biggest problem is he's an emotional sadist who is absolutely convinced, in my opinion, that all his fans, all his viewers of all his shows are willing masochists, and can't understand when they're not. So I think trying to bring her into Conversations with Dead People was an attempt to stick it to the fans. And Amber Benson, to her great credit, and she was all, I mean, I was already admired her greatly, but she went way up in my estimations when she turned him down. Then there was this talk of a wish, that Buffy was going to get this wish, a chance to bring someone back. And apparently the story was she was going to talk to, she would be talking to Dawn about maybe bringing their mother back, but eventually they decide to bring Tara back. I don't believe this story for a minute. Now, I believe that Joss has said it. I don't believe for a second that was ever a thing. As far as I'm aware, I don't think Amber Benson ever heard that story either, although I think she's been asked about it. I think he was trying to deflect blame. I think he wanted to say, no, the only reason you never got Tara back is because Amber Benson wouldn't come back. Given everything we now know, I can see why Amber Benson didn't want to come back. Because as she said in interviews, she didn't trust him. She didn't trust that he would honor his word. Because the thing is, like any sort of snake oil salesman, he can tell you whatever the hell he likes. But once you sign that contract that you're going to appear in this episode, that episode, and that episode, once he's got you locked in, he can do what the hell he likes. And you've got no recourse because you're locked in a contract. My question is to Joss, if, and I don't believe for a second this was the case, but if it was always your intention to have Tara die, and then she becomes this manifestation of the first, and then she ends up being resurrected with this wish. If that was always your plan, why, when you were negotiating episodes for season 6, why didn't you negotiate with Amber, look, I need you for this many episodes of season 6, I need you this many episodes of season 7, and give the whole arc? That's what I would have done. As a showrunner, that's what I would have done. I would have locked her in, and then she couldn't have said anything. If that was your honest intention. But I don't believe it was, which is why you didn't do it. I've said in previous videos that I don't trust Joss Whedon as far as I can throw him now, and I certainly will never watch anything that he has directly created. I enjoyed the Avengers, Age of Ultron not so much, but I enjoyed the Avengers. I liked his modern take on Much Ado About Nothing. But those are things that he had little creative control over. I mean, Much Ado About Nothing is based on Shakespeare, so all he's doing is adapting. He's not the driving force of that. With the Avengers movies, he's using other people's toys for a movie of his own, but he can't really damage them that much because they're going to be doing they're going to be in other people's movies after that in both cases. So his power is limited there. I consider the death of Tara to be possibly the worst thing to ever be placed on television in terms of a dramatic moment, because it fails as drama, in my opinion. It completely failed. I think the legacy of Tara sadly is one of people defying people and demanding better. And I say sadly, not because I don't think people should be demanding better of the writers, they should, but because it was the painful thing that happened that caused it. People said at that point enough was enough. And I think that's down to the fact that it was such a blatant example of the dead evil lesbian cliche, the kill the gays trope. It was such a blatant one. As I said earlier, it's not just that they went with it note for note. I think they filmed the definitive version. I think when people look back and say, "Oh, can you give me an example of what you mean by the dead evil lesbian cliche?" They'll just stick on Buffy season 6. That's not a legacy Buffy needs. It's not a legacy that show should ever feel proud of, ever. I think it's telling that writers in the interim have come out and said, no, we were wrong. Bit late, should have done that before. There's that wonderful line from Jurassic Park when Ian Malcolm is talking with the industrialist played by Richard Attenborough, and they're talking about, he's saying about all the wonderful, Ian Malcolm's talking about, you lack of humility, and the you stood on the shoulders of giants and you took the next step. You didn't earn the accomplishments, and he gets fobbed off by saying, we've made real advances. And Ian Malcolm says the line that I really wish the Buffy writers had listened to. You were so busy worrying, you were so busy thinking about whether you could do a thing, you never stopped to ask yourself whether or not you should. And I wish they'd done that. With so many storylines in season 6, but especially the death of Tara. Just stop and think. For God's sake, just stop and think. As a result of that, I watched season 7 more in hope than joy, and whilst I still love the earlier seasons. I've long since gotten rid of my DVD box sets. I mean, they're on Disney Plus. If I ever feel like watching some of the earlier episodes, I just can't watch season 6. Even the musical, which I think is a fantastic episode, don't get me wrong, I can't watch because it's painful because I know what's coming. When I do watch episodes of Buffy, it tends to be from the first 3 seasons, mostly because when I get to season 4, that's when Tara appears and I know what's coming. And that really upsets me because I really like the character, but, you know, can't watch them. Can't watch the late seasons. I'd sort of been really emotionally invested in Buffy and Angel, so I watched both until the end. Um, I don't think either of them really ended on a great note, although I did like the way that Angel ended. I loved that that it ended on a sort of cliffhanger sort of thing, um, where you kind of assume that they were going to go down fighting, but you weren't entirely sure. I kind of look at it as a sort of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid sort of ending. Um, Firefly did nothing for me. Neither did Dollhouse. Neither did Agents of Shield. Um, as I said in my previous videos, I was almost going to watch the others. The others, because it's such steampunk fantasy, would have been right up my alley. But the moment I knew it was Joss Whedon involved, I didn't watch it. And the reason for that is that once you realise what Joss Whedon is, once you realise that he can't help himself, that he is incapable of actually doing something proper, that he just cannot get his head uh, round the idea that you can have happiness in a show. I said in my previous video, the problem, that one of the major problems I have with season 6 of Buffy, and something that sort of permeates through his work, is Joss just doesn't like happiness. Um, he wallows in sadness. He wallows in nihilism, which I think says a lot for his psychological makeup. But he wallows in it. His argument is if everyone's happy and light and lovey and dovey, you can't create drama. That's not strictly true, but yeah, it certainly restricts it. But the problem is if you have nothing but nihilism and death and pain, that doesn't create drama either. Drama comes from tension. Drama comes from the unknown. Now, if you know a relationship is never going to break up, regardless, there's no tension. Because you know whatever argument's going on, they're going to make up at the end. But also, if you know that every relationship fails, there's no tension either, because when they have an argument, you just sit there and go, oh, well, this must be the one. No, oh, well, it'll be the next one. There's no tension. There's just the anticipation of defeat. And that's not drama. Um, I've seen people say that they've went through depression and so on, and they found season 6 to be cathartic. I didn't. I was going through a lot in my life, still am to an extent. But I was in a really bad place back then, emotionally, psychologically. And I didn't find season 6 cathartic at all. I actually found it. I wanted desperately for it to be, for it to turn into something golden, and it never did. Um, it was almost abuse, self abuse. and not in any kind of fun or euphemistic way. It was emotional abuse. It wasn't cathartic. It wasn't releasing. It didn't help. And having pushed myself away from Buffy for the most part, um, I've realised that now, and I don't watch it anywhere near as much. As I say, I got rid of all my Buffy, my Angel DVDs, and I can watch the occasional one on Disney Plus if I want. I do have the board game that came out a couple of years ago from Jesco Games, and I do like that. But whilst it um, has elements from season 6, they don't have to play out in the same way. You can win. There can be joy. And that's a good thing. I will probably never discuss this again after this. This is me voicing it, and it's already an hour. It wasn't good enough. They could have done so many interesting things with Willow's storyline. They could have had a situation, and it looked like they were getting that way, but then it went away, of essentially Willow being cast with the angel on one shoulder being Tara, trying to pull her away from dark magic and abusing her power. And I never actually saw her drug addiction as being her magic addiction as being a drug analogy. I always saw it as her being drunk on power rather than an addiction. But it's possibly splitting hairs. But Tara being the angel on one shoulder and Amy being the devil on the other, and maybe seeing her and Amy becoming this, her and Amy and Rack becoming this sort of mystical, sort of dark magic trio, as opposed to the other guys. That could have made for an interesting season 6. Willow falling farther and farther and farther away as she becomes more and more addicted. More and more dependent on power and just her entire moral compass spinning off. That could have been interesting. That could have been done, but they didn't. They wimped out. And I think that's the worst part of it. They wimped out and went for what they thought was an easy picking, and it wasn't. Well, as I say, this is probably the last time I'm going to speak about this to any great length. Don't even know if I'll post this video. I'm just voicing it for myself as much as any just now. But if you liked season 6 of Buffy, fine. If you thought it was cathartic, I'm glad for you. If you thought the storylines worked, fair enough. But for me, not even close on any of them. Didn't like it. Didn't find it cathartic. Didn't think the storylines held up. I consider season 6 of Buffy to be the worst season of Buffy by some distance. I even put season 1 ahead of it. And season 1 was a small show finding its feet. As for Joss, for as long as I live, for as long as there's television, for as long as anything else, if he's actually the full sole creator of something, I'm not watching it. Because Joss has his own cliches. And once you realize them, once you see them, once you know them, there's no point to arguing them. You can see them coming. even if you don't know the specifics, the specific way it will happen, you know it's going to happen. So it's not a surprise. And once that happens, it's boring. If someone asked me to sum up what I thought of Firefly in one word, I would say boring. For that reason. Didn't hate it. Didn't love it, obviously. Didn't dislike it, didn't like it. I was just meh, bored. Why? Because even if I didn't know the exact particular, anything that happened, I was like, yep, typical Joss. And after that, if a show doesn't surprise you, there's nothing to invest in. So those are my thoughts. Long-winded, 20 years in the making, an hour and 11 minutes to voice. Thanks very much.